everybody. How are you? All right. So, today we're going to talk about leadership, right? Leadership today. Our conversations is going to be about quiet quitting, motivation, intentions, and of course, added value conversations, right? And today I'm going to share this information by my team over here. Amazing team. Go ahead and introduce yourself. Start with Jason.
My name is Jason Hurley. I work in marketing and branding, and I have a background in change management, product development, and learning and development.
Perfect. Joseph, your turn.
Hey, my name is Joseph Gonzalez. I'm the owner of a company called In the Game Group, and basically organizational development, team building, toxic work environments, culture, leadership skills, and strategies. That's what I do.
Awesome. Welcome. And Mr. Brett Packard, sir, introduce yourself.
Great, yeah, sure. Great to be here with everybody. And I'm a retired 30-year retail and wealth management global banker. Worked across 30 countries, transforming cultures, leading teams. And now what I do today is I have a very small elite portfolio of elite performers around the world, and I help them optimize and sustain their performance amidst adversity.
Amazing. Aren't they amazing? You guys already know me, but for those who doesn't know me, I am a professor. I run a podcast called Level Up. All of these gentlemen actually are on my podcast. Congratulations to you guys because the podcast is about you, not me. And we are in 44 or 45 nations now. Amazing. We're almost at 2,000 downloads for starting in February. We haven't really marketed it. It's just more of like here on LinkedIn. But today, I actually wanted to engage in a conversation that is, I guess, made into TikTok, right? To made famous, but really people were already quiet quitting a long time ago, but it's just a new buzzwords. TikToker Zaid Khan actually is the one that kind of talk about work-life balance and refers to not outright quitting the job, but like disengage, right? In terms of quiet quitting. And I wanted to read this. It says that, let's see, 322 billion costs associated with global turnover and lost productivity. And this is according to the report surveyed with 12,000 employees. And the organizations are losing 20 million for every 10,000 employees annually due to poor employee well-being and drain the issue has on performance. Okay, so we're gonna start that conversation. But Brett is going to introduce us about quiet quitting within our leadership. Go ahead, Mr. Packard.
Yeah, so I thought of how a good way to describe this for those that is to make it really different than the buzzwords because I think it's become a really popular buzzword and a lot of people don't really know what it is. They just think it's people that are quitting and getting on the sidelines. And I so I'd like to kind of introduce quiet quitting as something that it is really human beings becoming animals. And what I mean by that is that as a human, we were born with a gift. And that gift that we have is to actually be creative and to blossom to our full potential. And all of us have different potentials. We're all different. And it was just a gift that we all have. And, if animals are built to just survive and they're brilliant. I was watching some squirrels prepare for the winter in the fall back in Nebraska, and they're really busy preparing those nuts, burying those nuts in the ground, and guess what? They do it every year. Those squirrels they're relentless and they just get the job done, but they don't know how to do other things, right? And as humans, so if we get back to the topic here of quiet quitting, which is basically saying, you know what, I'm not gonna quit my job because I need a paycheck, but you know what, I am not going to put in any effort towards realizing my full potential for various reasons. And it's usually related to toxic types of ecosystems. So it's really a human being that does the quiet quitting, saying, you know what, I'm just going to be more like that squirrel or more like a flower, and I'll blossom to X instead of X to the nth degree, which is what they have the potential of. So to me, quiet quitting, Dr. Leyland, is a very sad case of humans. Anybody that is quiet quitting, they're actually dehumanizing themselves. Now, does that make them? I'll wrap it up with this. Does that make them a bad person? It doesn't at all. Okay, and it's very sad because it's really the ecosystem that has caused them to feel this way, and typically maybe putting their needs last instead of their needs first, and all sorts of other issues. It's a complicated issue as to what has caused them to feel this way, but part of it is also a demand for instant gratification, which, frankly, is not, which leads to drug addiction. It can lead to alcohol problems, all sorts of other issues as well. Instant gratification in the business world is not something that's going to just appear like that. So it does require a bit of, let's say, give and take. The person that is doing the quiet quitting, okay, they're being portrayed in the community and in the media as a victim, okay? If they're in a toxic environment, they are a victim, right? But if they're just quiet quitting and saying, I'm going to become a squirrel, okay, I think that there's a bit of an attitude adjustment to reality that needs to happen as well. And so a lot of it is related to, we need to develop a better ecosystem, and we need to, the individuals need to learn how to navigate and flourish to their full potential within a bad ecosystem, if that makes sense. That's my own definition of quiet quitting that I guarantee you won't find anywhere on Google.
Nope, not even Siri can figure that one out. That's actually pretty good though. I'm a visual person, so I was like trying to figure out. I'm like, yeah, you're right. Those squirrels do have time where they just burst. Like I'm thinking of my English bully. I have a young one that sprint really fast with my German Shepherd, but for 5 seconds, and then the rest, it's just like I'm not going anywhere anymore. So that's how I feel that too. But Jason, what does that look like in organizations today?
I think you have to talk about like adversity quotient and put that into the equation. And I think that is the way people think, manage, and endure the challenges of life. And a lot of times in the workplace, you have different kinds of employees. You have the quiet quitter. You have those employees that may be a camper type deal, and then a climber. So a lot of times with the quiet quitter, they have a lot of stuff going on outside of the office, outside of the workplace, and especially when you're looking at work-life balance and different things like that. And adversity hits them. So when they come into the workplace, they may do their 9 to 5. They may not go to meetings unless it's mandatory. They may not go above and beyond, and there's a certain appreciation piece that's lacking. Then you have different employees who may be a camper where they may be a good employee, but getting them to that next level to level up, there's a piece that the organization is missing too, as far as getting them to go above and beyond. And then you have the people that maybe just naturally are resilient, and they come in and those are your go-getters. They really don't need all of that motivation, so to speak, but they come in and they know exactly what they're doing. And I think where quiet quitting comes into play, we're lacking open, honest, and transparent communication. And I think if we have a little bit more open, honest, and transparent communication, that will solve some of the problems. Gallup just ran a survey this year, and it said that the majority of quiet quitters in the workplace are under the age of 35 years old. So when you look at the workplace and you look at under the age of 35, that's where the majority of the quiet quitting is happening. I think you have a lot of opportunity, and I think you need to be real cognizant of how you approach this situation and come up with some viable solutions.
Awesome. I like that stats because now you kind of pinpoint your target market for work-life balance information. Joseph, how does this hurt the organization's culture and the bottom line? Like, how would you inspire business leaders to help maintain the balance of your employees' personal and work life?
Well, when we talk about balance, to me, there's no way that you can balance an employee and your personal life. For me, it's always to try to find that harmony within everybody, within yourself, within your professional life, with your loved ones, your friends, your family. And because in reality, when we try to balance, it'll never happen. Because I'll take me as a perfect example. I have 3 children. I have a professional life, I have a family, and I will never find the balance. But what I've managed to do is understand that if I continue to leave an open, honest, real communication with everybody that I'm involved with, whether it be in my professional life or in my personal life, I have a better chance of sustaining the life that I lead over a certain amount of time. But I'm going to go back to something that I believe Brett said. The quiet quitting. We all know it's been around for a long time, but now it's a buzzword. And to me, I'll do Brett. Those buzzwords to me drive me insane. Because if you look at any, or if you've worked like Brett has worked in 30, 100 years in high level elite performance, he understands what quiet quitting is, and he can recognize it right away when an individual is backing out or disengaging. Now, for me, when I recognize that an individual is disengaging or backing out, I look at it in a different way. Yes, the organization might not be the best, the environment might not be the best, the culture might be terrible, but the one that's being affected the most is the individual that's disengaging and quiet quitting, like we say. Because if you understand the mental ramifications that has on that individual, and especially if that individual stays at the current position and they start disengaging and backing out, that's gonna create a whole different host of problems over the long term, because that's when his mind starts kicking in, the stress, the anxiety, and you know what comes after that, burnout. So for me, it's a matter of recognizing, acknowledging, engaging with that individual and trying to draw them in by having an open, honest, and secure conversation where that individual is free to be themselves and explain why they quiet quit. That would be my 2 cents, basically.
Actually, that's ideal. That was my thing too. It's like, how do you recognize someone when they quiet quit? Usually, what I do is I know my team. Like, you have to know your people when they are at its best, their best, and also when they're feeling down, right? Because we do that now anyway. Without this buzzwords of quiet quitting, we do that. When you see your people always showing up, always performing, and then all of a sudden you see a decline. Like for me, when they don't grade on time for teachers, right? And I'm like, it's Sunday. Like we have 7 days to grade. Like what happened? It's Tuesday and you're not grading. And you ask the questions like, is everything okay? Right? I think not pointing fingers like something's wrong with you, like assuming there's something wrong rather than asking the questions like, is there anything I can help you with? They know where you're heading with that conversation. People are not.
My biggest point, Constance, is from the first touch that you have with that individual, you must maintain that individual engaged, give them a seat at the table, let them have that conversation, and be open to listening and learning from each other so you can grow. And as soon as that individual backs out, you have to recognize it because you're on him. You're on your team every single day. You must know how they operate.
Yeah.
And you must jump in before it gets too out there.
Yeah. And I think that's the disadvantage too of like, we're going to talk about hybrid work in a minute, but that's also sometimes a disadvantage of being in Zoom only or being so far away is if a leader does not know how to balance of getting to know their people, not in person, but just doing Zoom, you kind of like lack of that touch if you don't know how to communicate with them, right? So we go back with that. So how do you actually recognize quiet quitting is through performance and just through conversations, having that conversations with them, knowing what they're supposed to do. And also, people forget that when you onboard a new employee, if you don't have the support, and if you don't act like, I've been in jobs where like, here you go, there's your title, but like, what am I supposed to do? Oh, you figure it out. Here's the report that you need. I know Brett knows this because he's a great leader and he just supports his people. But there are managers and leaders out there that don't. They just give you the job and they don't tell you exactly what you're supposed to do. They quiet quit right there at the very beginning on you, right? For sure.
But that's the fault of the leadership, the irrelevant leadership that Brett knows very well. That's the fault of that type of leadership style. That is irrelevant. It's obsolete. It needs to go. And we know it's not where it should be at the time. And I always tell everybody, look, being a leader isn't I'm sorry, Brett, being a leader isn't a title, position, or compensation. Anybody's a leader. We can all treat each other as human, respect, integrity, honesty, kindness, caring, and empathetic sharing. We can all lead. It's just a matter of each individual wanting to do that.
Yeah, I think if I could just add to that, I think that's very well said, Joe. And then you have to then step back. The way that I look at this, and by the way, I wasn't always the way that I am today. It took me 19 years and almost failing and getting fired in the UK for people not being responsive to my leadership because I didn't know how to lead, right? So this is not the kind of thing that you just pop into leadership. And a lot of people are appointed to leadership and they were promoted because they were a really great individual performer. And guess what? They're no longer in charge of their own performance. They're now responsible for supporting the village with them, and they don't know how to do that. They only know how to do what? To perform and to do the work themselves. So all this stuff that we're talking about here, this is a big part of the root cause of it, with that these leaders don't know how to do. But what I like to look at nowadays is to take a step back and ask, okay, everything that Joe said, I completely agree with, is perfect. But then I step back and say, well, why? Why is that? Why are there leaders that have to go? I think we all agree they're irrelevant and that type of thing. Well, the reason why is that it's not necessarily their behavior or the fact that they haven't been trained, but it's the ecosystem or the culture people. I try to use ecosystem nowadays because culture's even become a buzzword. So it's the ecosystem. And I've got a new analogy that I just made up the other day. I was on a podcast with somebody that called saltwater, that, if it's saltwater and you've got freshwater fish, I'm sorry, but they're not going to survive. They're going to quiet quit, right? And that's what's going to happen. So a great leader isn't going to just let those fish go, which is what's happening, by the way. Those are Joe's statistics of the billions of dollars, right? Yeah. So a great leader, you know what they're going to do? They're going to change the water. Okay. And we don't hear a lot of talk about that. This is the real root of the problem here, is not the freshwater fish, not the saltwater. We need people that can change the saltwater to be more of a hybrid to accommodate all types of fish, right? They're all different. And with that ecosystem, that can happen. Now, this isn't going to happen overnight. And the reason it's not going to happen overnight is that you've got a shareholder first philosophy worldwide in business that looks for return on capital and profits ahead of all things, including people. So therefore, sessions like this, the final point I'll make is that it's really up to the individuals to learn about, I'm swimming in salt water and I'm really not a saltwater fish. So I need to kind of learn, how can I survive here? And how can I, more important than that, not be just a squirrel, right? How can I find a way to actually flourish and realize my full potential? And there are ways to do that. And we'll talk about some of those, I think, Dr. Latham.
Awesome. I thought I was going to talk on mute again. Jason, introduce the conversation about hybrid work and motivation. Like, what is it? How is that a pro con to organizations or us individuals, really?
Yeah, so this is really kind of off of 2020. Hybrid work environments have been really relevant as far as potential candidates, why they want to come work for an organization. I think 15 years ago, if you asked a company, what do you offer from a benefits? I think if you talked about insurance or if you talked about what kind of retirement benefits I may get, then that may work. But now I think candidates are looking at a hybrid work environment. I think that is up there as far as one of the benefits. Um, you can look at it two ways. You can look at employee morale, employee engagement, the flexibility, because a lot of companies spend a lot of money on engagement or employee opinion surveys. And what's coming out of that is, hey, let us have the flexibility that we need to work in a hybrid work environment. That could benefit certain companies' culture. Obviously, from a lean efficiency standpoint, working in a hybrid work environment helps there. And then just from an overall operational space, you may not need as much overhead as you traditionally had just because you are having a hybrid work environment. So those are the pros there. I think where some companies may have a little bit of reluctance is the collaboration piece. Collaboration is very hard to do in a hybrid work environment. It can work, but we kind of mentioned it, an onboarding type deal. You also look at from an interview. It's very hard to connect sometimes in a virtual setting when you're bringing new employees on and different things like that. Burnout may be an issue that you have to be careful with because some employees in a hybrid workspace, it is very easy to grab that laptop, grab that desktop, send that email, and you're working more in a hybrid work environment than you are in the office. And so I think there's a couple different things that people need to look at, when we talk about a hybrid work environment. And then last but not least, is it really a one size fits all approach? Because I'm going to tell you from the insurance industry, a hybrid work environment may run a little bit more smoother than if I look in the hospitality industry. You may want the same success, but it may look a little bit different. So we have to be patient. We have to kind of really put the things out there and really manage our expectations as the pros and cons to see if a hybrid work environment is really good for your organization.
Awesome. You talk a lot of good items in there in terms of pros and cons. Joseph, tell us how hybrid work could benefit business leaders and organizations today.
I remember when the pandemic first hit, I remember a lot of folks wanting to go home. No, let me go home. Let me go home. I mean, I think I did a panel with Brett a couple of years ago regarding the remote work environment and what's going on with it. And I think it was done in Bradstreet, if I'm not wrong. They did a poll right when it started. And what they found out was a lot of people want to go home, but they don't want to stay home. Because that's what Jason said. You sit in a room all day. And then what was happening, and Brett and I discussed this as well, they were on meetings all day, Zoom meetings all day, every day, 25 meetings a day. So what happened? Burnout. They were stressed out. They were anxious, burnt out. And they said, dude, I don't want to be here. I don't want to be home. I want to go back to work. So then when they were told to go back to work, what happened then? The same thing. Oh, now I got to be at work every day. So now I got to deal with the leaders, the managers, the this, and now I got to be at work every day. So then that's where we come about with the hybrid. And Jason brought up a valid point. What do people want nowadays? People want flexibility. They want the ability to maybe take their kids to school, pick them up, maybe go home for a couple hours, maybe come back into the office, just have room. And I always use this because when I do the Colby assessments, and to me, it's paramount that each individual should be free to be themselves. And if you don't understand how each and every individual in your organization operates, how will you ever find out if they're better in hybrid, they perform better in a hybrid work environment, they perform better in remote, or they perform better in office? Obviously, all data is measurable. I know if Jason performs based on the data that I have in front of me, based on what he's doing. But at the end of the day, if I see Jason not performing and he's hybrid, I want to bring him in. Hey, Jason, what's going on? Give me some feedback about you. I want to know what's going on because I know you. Where are we going from here? So, I mean, hybrid is great, but I think it's going to be based around, just my opinion, on each individual where they perform the best. And I like them to be free to be themselves and place them or align them and optimize them to be their best in a hybrid, remote, or an office work environment.
Okay, I can work for you. I like flexibility. That's for sure. I quit being a dean on ground because I couldn't do hybrid. Okay. And I was like, why? And people just, what's amazing to me is this hybrid work is like, oh, it just came about in 2020. My husband's been doing hybrid for 15 years. It's nothing new. I teach online for almost 10 years before COVID. It's nothing new. But I think, okay, I believe that traditional businesses like insurance, right? Because I know a lot of people who still works for Geico, that basically said, hey, you can't do this at work. I mean, at home, right? But because of COVID, people and organizations were forced to actually make innovative ideas to work from home. And because people now know that it's possible, they don't take no for an answer anymore when you ask, hey, can I work remote? Honestly, I used to drive an hour one way. And why? I don't know why. I was crazy, I guess. But that was the norm. Like, you drive where you need to be working. But when you're like, wait, I don't have to do that. Why do I have to do my insurance is higher, my car, my gas, right? That's a lot of money. And so then, of course, your maintenance for car, if you don't have to do it, don't do it. However, just like Joseph said, there's also this burnout of Zoom all day long. Like, seriously, right? It's just too much. So I think you're right. You need to be customized as an organization. If you are business leaders today, if you know, it's all about trust. I think if you trust your employee that you actually want the outcome that you need before or after COVID, and it's the same, if not more, then you're okay. I think if you don't trust your employees to do their job, then you bring them into the office, like Joseph said. Hey, I know you're performing well. I just want to know what's happening. Maybe it's not about the hybrid. Maybe there's something changed in their life, maybe their health. But having that conversation would actually benefit each and every of your employees. But it's hard when you're a CEO and you have 3, 10, 15,000 employees, right? If you're a startup like us, we have 2 people, no problem. If you have 2,000, 20,000, 30,000, how do you do it? Brett, your turn from your
Yeah,
experience.
and you do it the way they're doing it in Singapore, for example, right? So a lot of these issues are U.S. centric that we're talking. The Great Resignation is, for the most part, only in the U.S. Okay. Now, the U.S. happens to be the world's largest economy, so it's a serious issue, right? But there's other parts of the world that are shareholder first, right? That have found a way to do it. So there's a lot to unpack here with this. So I'm going to do my best to try to do the short version. And I'm going to kind of add some different perspective to this conversation, more the international lens, right? Just because I'm very much attuned as to what's happening. If you live in Hong Kong, okay, and you talk about this hybrid and lockdown, not lockdown, quarantine, the Chinese government influence over the Hong Kong government in transition, all of those things as well. If you live in Hong Kong, okay, and I spent a lot of time in that country, a lot of people, most people that I worked with for an affluent bank have more space in their cubicle at work and the surrounding area, the coffee bar, the break room, than they do at home. That's just reality, right? The living space. So it's entirely different, right? And it's not just Hong Kong, right? So I lived 6 years in Japan. A lot of Japanese don't have a lot of excess space at home, right? And so there's a value that they have of going to the office. So in a global context, okay, I think it's important here. I remember a case when I lived in Dubai and had, who is now a CEO in Istanbul. She got pregnant, right? And she said, what am I going to do here? And I said, well, where are you going to have the baby? And she said, I'm going to go home to Turkey to do it that way. And, Dubai is a very international place. I said, go now. You can work remotely. This was 2009. It was unheard of to work remotely inside of a bank. I had everybody coming to me in HR, you can't do this, da 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 da. To this day, so we did it anyway, right? I put my equity on the line for this woman because she knew how to perform and she could do her job from her mother's house in Istanbul, right? And it didn't matter if she was in Dubai or not, right? It was just ridiculous. So a lot of this, and Dr. Leyland, I think I heard you just say it. Your husband has been doing this for years, right? So many parts of, and let me bring it current in Singapore, right? I talked to several people last week, and I said, "So what's this hybrid, stuff?" And of course, they read U.S. media. They just laughed and said, "Look, I'm still 4 days a week from home, but it's completely flexible. If I want to go to the office to change a game, I can do that. But I got to get my work done. I got to perform." And so a lot of this has been, and Morgan Stanley in the United States last week just announced massive layoffs. But guess what? 5 days before that massive layoff, do you know what they did? They said everybody must come back to the office. So you have to read into this topic that we're talking about. There's more to it than just the buzzwords. And the case of Morgan Stanley, it's now out in the open that them mandating people to come back to the office 100% was just a ploy to get cost out, to get people to voluntarily quit. So you've got profit-driven large enterprises in the United States that are taking this issue that people like us are talking about, saying, you know what, let's just have them come back because they're not going to come back, and then we don't have to give them severance package. They'll quit on their own. So this is not every company, right? But this is the world's largest economy. This is what's going on. Outside of this economy, it's quite different. It's quite different in Australia. You've got people still doing hybrid type of work in Melbourne, Sydney. You could talk to them, right? Not every company, but many companies as well. So I think it's important to keep the context. But back to why am I saying all of this? Well, if there's one value that can be gained from this conversation of people, and we welcome any questions, by the way, please understand that you have to, as an individual, navigate the system. Don't expect all of this to just flip on its head and change overnight, and people to say you can work remotely, because as Joe rightly said, people were getting burned out on Zoom. And single mothers, their bosses were requiring them to dial into Zoom at 8 o'clock at night after dinner because it was convenient for the boss. So you've got all sorts of abuse of this system. Meanwhile, you've got the Singapore economy humming along, doing great, right? And they're just laughing at the United States because this has just become a cost-cutting, type of thing as well. So look to other parts of the world. Look to people that have exposure to this, and basically, here's the rule: if you can perform, okay, you can have the flexibility. That's a form of compensation. In the United States, if you're in the United States right now, I guarantee you, if you can show performance, right, you're probably going to have more say so in work. And if you don't, jump somewhere else, because there is greener grass, right?
I love it.
Did I go? I don't know if I went off the rails there, but that's my.
No, I love it, because you're right.
Yeah.
Business today is not just about America. It is about the world. Like I've been telling my students, you're complaining about having a job and this and that, but remember, you're no longer competing with your zip code. Not even in the States, not even in the United States. You're competing your job with the rest of the world because of hybrid.
That's right.
Keep that in mind. Be blessed that you still have a job to complain about, right? That's for sure.
Right.
Now, Joseph, take us and introduce us to about leadership support. Like, what does it mean to have leadership support?
Well, when you talk, I'm going to touch on bases just before I start on the leadership support on something that Brett said. And I've encountered a lot of folks that have said the grass is greener on the other side. But my suggestion, same has always been, don't ever forget, you still have to water that grass. Because if not, the grass is going to dry out and burn out just like it did in your previous position. So even though we might consider making that jump because we see something greener, we have to continue to perform. If not, believe me, they're not going to hold you long, or you're going to have to move on to the next side. But leadership support, if we talk about large organizations, let's say Tesla, Elon Musk, how much does he actually engage with his bottom line workers? Basically none. So when you talk about leadership support, I've walked into different organizations where the leaders are up here and then they have their managers, their directors, their VPs, et cetera, down the line. And what I found is that most of the time, the disconnect between the different levels causes most of the bad work environment, the culture not being where it needs to be, the leveling up, the skilling up, all these different factors that have come into play that lead to what we know as the Great Resignation. So my train of thought has always been, let me see how I can make sure that they continue to stay engaged within themselves so that they can provide sufficient support for those that are under them to continue to grow the organization in the manner that they want it to grow. Now, I always like to use measurable, because anything and everything that we do in any organization or anywhere you want to do, if you really want to hone in on it, it must be measurable. So when you talk about the support, it comes down to the ones that are under the leaders, the ones that are under those, and it trickles down from the top all the way to the bottom. So support is something that's huge in any larger organization, and it must be continuous. It must be something that you bring to the forefront every day, and it takes a whole group of individuals to make sure that support is followed through on a daily basis. I can go more and more, but that's the simplified version.
No problem. Thank you for that input. Also, I'm glad that you said that about, even though the grass is greener on the other side, you have to keep watering the plants, because you're right. Now that it's December, my grass is slowly growing. During the summer in California, our water is $700 a month. And yeah, my electric was like $1,500. It was just too much, going to 2,000 now, probably during winter. It's crazy. I'm like, okay, so what do you do? How many people does it take? We're playing a game, but how many people does it take to run family of four in the state of California? A lot. But then you're like, okay, but what about your job? And what about leadership board? What about this? I remember the time that I was a dean in multiple universities, but one time where they're like, oh yeah, you're hired. I'm like, okay, the job description says this, but in reality, what do I need to do? They just give you the report and said, okay, figure it out. Oh, by the way, you need this many people to graduate, and this is your faculty. These are the classes, and you need teachers in there, and these are the students. I'm like, okay, how do you guys do it? Well, it's not working out right now, so you're going to have to figure it out. Oh, by the way, class starts next week. Huh? Literally, that's what I said. Huh? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, oh my God, I didn't sleep for 3 days. Literally, I had 2 hours. And my husband was like, are you okay? I'm like, no, I'm not. I have no idea what I'm getting into. This is the grass is greener. I'm hybrid now. I'm supposed to be relaxed. What is happening? But it's not happening. I had to make sure that I had all my stuff in a row. And I wish I had support. I did have support from my team, but not from leadership on top. Right. And it's super important that you have that type of support that you get, because without it, people will burn out faster than you can say goodbye.
And one of the things that I see all the time, and I'm sure you guys have seen it too, they use that one size fits all hiring policy where Joe doesn't know IT, but he's going to be our computer guy. I'm going to put he's got a master's in janitorial work. He's going to be our computer guy. He knows how to read and write. He's got the job. Boom, they throw me in there, and you know what's going to happen, right? Whatever's left is going to go out. I'm going to burn out, fizzle out, and I'm out the door. So that's what I try to tell. And I walked into an organization, a flower, and they're from South America. Their train of thought, the way that they process what actual support is non-existent. They hire their own folks. They pay them rock bottom, and then they don't take care of them. And it hurts me to know that they're making X amount of dollars. They're thriving, importing and exporting flowers, and they don't take care of the people that they have within their organizations. And it was tough for me to sit there and listen through this, knowing that this guy pulled up in a Bentley, and the guy that's turning and burning the flowers in that truck is making $8 an hour in the United States of America. And they don't give them health insurance. They don't give them anything. Oh, you can work overtime. Yeah, but overtime's going to be $12 an hour, dude. And then, so moral of the story is I got in there. I fought back and forth, and they put up a lot of pushback, because I'm trying to change this whole thing where they're making millions, and now they want me. I'm telling them that they got to give some of those millions to those people over here. But at the end of the day, you know what? They kind of understood what I was trying to say, and I told them, look, you guys are selling flowers because of one thing: them people out there. You don't touch the flowers. You don't see the flowers. You sit here and you take off in that Bentley, and those people are going home in that little Toyota that's beat up, and they got 3 children, food, clothes, shelter. They need it. Why don't you do something for yourself to make them better? So the vice president was the one that was kind of hesitant. Now he called me, I think it was today, Monday. He called me Friday. And we've gotten along real well. And now they're starting to get the concept of, hey, provide support for your people, because they are your bottom line.
Did he sell his Bentley to give support?
No,
I was like, I want to get full support. Give me your Bentley.
My sole purpose there was not to tell him that he's got to spend anything. My sole purpose was to get his mind understanding that the only reason he has that Bentley is because of those people out there, not because of him. He's not doing anything. He's the owner. He's over here. He's making 20, 30, 40, 50 million. It's a small company. 20, 30, 40, 50 million bucks a year selling flowers.
Yeah.
And come on, man. Give that guy a couple more bucks.
Yeah. And that's a great real-time current example, Joe, of that person has a tank of salt water, right? And he's got freshwater fish trying to survive in that, and that fish is just choking, right? It just survived. It's not sustainable unless something happens. So sounds like he's starting to get the message that he better take some salt out of that water here, or he's not, he's going to kill off his fish, right?
Well, what I was going to do is tell his employees to turn into bull sharks, that they can go both in and salt water and fresh water.
Yeah, and that's what an ideal, that's what a utopian company would do, right? Is have that type of ecosystem, but that's a rarity to get that. But that's the perfect example. And Dr. Leyland, you gave a great example of what you had to do. It was baptism by fire, right? The classes start next week, but guess what? What I heard you say that you did, you performed. You did find a way. It wasn't easy. You performed. And my advice to you, or people, not you, but people in your situation that get thrown into the fire like that, is perform, but then you have leverage. Okay. Then you need to reach out to people like Joe or Jason, right? And to sit there and say, how can I use some leverage? Because I'm performing, but I don't like this salt water. I can't survive in this for very long, and they're not changing. So how can I market my skills in the marketplace better? That's where people need to reach out to experts for help in this situation. But the first thing is you got to perform. You can't just complain. And whatever you do, don't quit, because you're becoming a squirrel when you do that. And that's my message. You are wasting valuable time in a short life anyway.
Yeah. Jason, how about you? What kind of leadership support in your industry that you've seen that works?
I think a lot of it is the empowerment piece, with people. And I think it is it's a support, it's an empowerment, and it's accountability. And I think a lot of that comes into play especially in the insurance industry. Empowerment is huge. And just having somebody say that, you matter and being intentional about your career and taking notice of you and taking you under their wing, and kind of like how everybody said, not from day one, from the second that you come into the door, because I look at it like this. You get candidates coming in, you sell them on a promise. You say, hey, look, if you come work for this organization, we're going to give you all these different things. But you are telling them when you work here, the culture is going to be great, all of this. And I really think that companies that really follow through on that and take them from day one, from start to finish, I think those employees, that is the biggest difference. And that employee engagement, that feeling seen, that heard, that valued, that understood, all of that stuff mixed in together, I don't think you really have to worry about quiet quitting when people kind of take you from day one and they do it the right way. And so just for me, I think it's really, man, just being intentional in your approach and letting people know that they matter. And I think from there, they go ahead and take it from there. And if you need them, great. But just having that support is huge. It's huge.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll go to work for you. I mean, that's perfect. That's exactly the kind of, you're not operating a saltwater tank, Jason. That's the point here, right? Because I just heard you say that you're going out there and you're making a promise, and then you're going to deliver that promise, right? And so it does happen today out there, and it happens in a lot of places today. In a lot of places, it doesn't happen, and then you get all of this quiet quitting and cost cutting type of, people using that for cost cutting. So, but that's the best articulation that I've heard about kind of how do you really build a utopia type of environment. You're going to attract the best talent when you do that.
It all starts from the first touch. Because that's what sets a stage. What I've known over years working with a couple of people is there's two ways to empower people. And a lot of people go for both of these, either recognition or incentivization. And you can recognize your employees all day long and they'll perform at their levels, or you can incentivize them and you'll get performance levels as well. But those are two major things that I know that work well with it, folks, especially at the lower level, recognition and incentivization. But it all starts from that very first touch. And
I'm glad you said that, because I was going to ask you actually what kind of tools do you provide or advice for business leaders today to show, great intentions and follow through for a company culture so that their employees can stay motivated?
For me, it's all about providing, and I'm huge on this because what I've seen over the years is, for me, is to provide a safe and trusted work environment for everybody. Everybody must be free to be themselves, like I said earlier, and provide a seat at the table. I'm the type of person that if you don't provide me a seat at the table, I'm going to go get my chair and I'm going to sit at the table. So when I see that people are being left out because they might not have the education, the status, the title, the position, to me, that's an unjust feeling. That's completely against what I've been raised to do and raised to know. So for me, it's always, how can I get this individual or my team to be empowered and to be open, honest, transparent, caring, sharing, and get everything together so we can be a cohesive unit and perform like Brett says, elite level performers. He brought up a valid point, past performance. They're going to give you the freedom to be you based on past performance. If you have a very good past performance record, you can rest assured you're going to be free to be yourself. They understand you're going to perform no matter what. They have a record on you. You're measurable, and they know what you're going to do. So for me, it's all about providing transparency to everybody and letting everybody have a seat at the table. I'm huge on that.
How about you, Brett? What kind of tools?
Yeah, I would just kind of add, just bolt onto the side of that. And I'll deliver this in the form of some advice for everybody watching here on, okay, how can you solution this problem? Jason painted the clear picture of what utopia would really look like. And that again, to me, was crystal clear. Joe just pointed out how you can really enable that and be inclusive with everybody. what I'd like to just add on top of that be put even a different lens on it. And that lens is, and this is my advice, look at your performance management system. What do you measure? Okay. How do you determine what you measure? And then what are your reward systems and do you have punitive systems? A lot of companies have punishment if you don't deliver. And that's what that tends to create fear in people, because people have to pay that mortgage. People have to pay 31% more for eggs. That's what's going on in at least the US now, in many parts of the world, inflation. So people begin to get worried if they say, oh, I'm not going to make my goal here. So here's my advice. Take your performance management system, all the leaders, all the owners out there, and replace all the punishment criteria with support criteria. You'll be amazed at the difference in morale and, to use Jason's words, engagement. Okay, we'll go through the roof if you do that. Remove the punitive, replace it with support. Second thing is involve your teams with how you set goals, right? Everybody's different, right? Everybody's different. We've talked about that and everything. Why treat everybody like a squirrel? Guess what? You treat people like squirrels, paint everybody with the same brush, you know what they're going to become? Squirrels. And we've already I think I established at the beginning, that is quiet quitting. It means you're a squirrel. But the leadership has caused this problem, right? So they've created squirrels, painting everybody with the same brush, performance system. And by the way, you have to come in the office instead of doing it from home and that type of thing. In Singapore, they don't do it that way. In Singapore, they sit there and say, you know what? We have the kind of ecosystem that's a performance ecosystem. It's supportive in nature. It's collaborative, that we will work. I'm going to sit down and, Dr. Leyland, what's important to you? And let's talk about what, in order for you to get a bonus, you're going to have to deliver. But how big of a bonus do you want? And why don't we tie your goals to what you want? You're going to be a lot more motivated if you can have some input into what your goals are. Jason, what's important to you? And maybe Jason's much more ambitious, and Jason, wants to buy that Bentley, right? As an example. And so Jason might say, well, Brett, boss, it's really important to me. I've dreamt about this Bentley. I like the compensation system here, but so I'll sign up for this goal if you'll give me this kind of bonus.
Yep.
And then, so we've got Dr. Leyland here, who's motivated by something entirely different than what Jason is. And I'm just giving an example here. And then Joe would be different than that. So that is what people can actually do to start to, it's all within your control. And as long as you deliver, then if people are more engaged, people are more inspired, they're going to deliver. So those are some things that I've done to back to your question, Dr. Leyland, around, leading with intention. That's how you do it, as an example in the performance. Take out the punitive, put in the supportive.
I like that. Maybe I'll get my Lamborghini. Come on, let's go.
Lamborghini, where'd the Lamborghini come from?
I want to touch on something that Brett said, because Brett touched on something that to me is extremely important. You have different people are motivated by different things. Two of the things that I've known over time is you have people that are internally motivated and you have people that are externally motivated. So once they figure out, or once you as the leader figure out what their motivational point is, like Brett expertly said, you can cater to that to bring out the best of that individual. So that's extremely important, because we must recognize that as leaders and empower our workforce based on whatever their motivational factors are. That's good. I like that.
Yeah, and I also see it through industry, right? Like a lot of teachers just want to collaborate and want to create a better space for their students. we know we're never going to get that Lamborghini as a teacher. Let's be honest, okay? Unless maybe you work for Harvard, but even then, right? Thank goodness I'm not the breadwinner of my family. I got a big dream over here. My husband is, but the thing is, I think you have to go by, I think, by industry. If you're in a sales team, yeah, Bentley's right there, vacation homes, right? All the bonuses. I love that. And I like the customized way of thinking what motivates you. And a lot of people just assume, leaders assume, oh, you're here, you're motivated for your pay. That's all you're motivated for is for your pay.
Yep.
Oh, and I'm giving you vacation. So that should motivate you, for 2 weeks, even though I work you like a dog for 6 days. And there's no remote for you, by the way, Jason. So forget about that Bentley for a minute, right? But what about you, Jason? What are the tools that you can provide for others to inspire their workers to keep going and not quite quit?
I mean, you guys really covered a lot of it. And I would say everything that you covered, and I think having that mindset, I think a lot of it starts here too. And I think that's going to be the other part of the equation that I would add to it. I think keeping that mindset so that you don't quite quit, so that you understand the opportunities that's presenting itself. I think mindset is such a huge thing, especially in the industry, in the workplace, in your jobs, your careers. And I think why people do what they do day in and day out is going to vary between each person. And I think that mindset that person has, as long as they keep that mindset sharp, I think the tools and everything else that you guys just addressed, I think everything will fall into place. But I think having that mindset, and this is more of an internal deal, but I think having that and bringing that to the space is definitely huge in regards.
Yeah, if I could, Jason, I think you just hit on something incredibly important for ultra high engagement, which is what I heard you just say. If I'm just going to use three words, winning the hearts and minds of people, right? You talk a lot about mindset, but also earlier you spoke about, really how do you get into the hearts of people? And, as a leader, what I just heard you say, if you can win the hearts and minds of your team, it's and then Joe, using Joe's company's name, get in the game, right? Get out there. Nothing can stop you, right? And that's really the formula for success, is winning the hearts and minds of people, and then just get on the field and let people be human.
Right. One of the things that I say, what Jason brought, mindset, if we understand from the moment we wake up every single morning, what do? We're receiving information from so many different sources that it's amazing that we have the ability to process that information. Now, the way that we process that information and what we decide to keep or discard, it's going to set the tone for the way we lead and live our lives on a daily basis. Because we have to understand that some of the information is being dictated by our immediate surroundings. And if we let our immediate surroundings dictate our life, and it's not a positive life, and we continue to revolve in that uncertain space every day, what are the chances that we're going to succeed in anything in life? It's very, very little. So we have to understand that from the moment we start listening to the information, whatever's going to favor us, we need to keep. Whatever's not going to favor us, we should have the ability to discard and keep on moving forward, even in our professional environment. Because the only one, I'll track back, the only one that's going to get hurt with quiet quitting is themselves. That's the major point that we have to push here, because quiet quitting doesn't affect the organization. They'll replace you in a second. Quiet quitting messes with your mental approach to life, which can ultimately lead to all the factors we spoke about before we got on this show. And that's where it gets dangerous and tricky.
Yeah.
Great point, Joe. Humans are not squirrels, right?
It's true.
We have
No, sir.
Bentley, squirrels,
There you go.
sharks. I'm loving this conversation. I actually just sent a message. So for all the leaders out there, it's called Innovative Leadership Workbook for Executives. It's free. It's like 58 pages. And these were already tested basically in the workplace. This is something that you can get for free. Just check it out in terms of the chapters. There's like 7 chapters, 113
Right.
pages in the book, but this is 58 just to kind of look you. I love the innovative leadership in here and the holistic leadership approach that business leaders can definitely look at. And of course, you can reach all these gentlemen. They have their own business. I'm about leveling up. Joe, stay in the game. And Brett over here is all about high executives. And Jason, of course, is also here. And I'm excited for us for 2023. Any last minute that you guys wanted to add in this conversation?
Who wants to go first?
Jason, go.
Keep these 3 doors open in your life. An open mind, an open heart, and open, honest, and transparent communication. And I think whether you're an individual or organization, I think if you keep those doors open, I think you'll be in a much better space and place in life. I think whenever you close one of those 3 doors, or if not all of them, I think we get in dangerous waters. So just keep those 3 doors open in your life and see what opportunities walk through those doors.
For
Awesome.
me, it's
Joseph?
live life with purpose. 4 of the things that I tell everybody to remember on a daily basis: believe, value, create or recreate yourself. Nobody can tell you how much your value, your worth. You're the one that dictates your worth, and your value does not decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. Stay true to you and live free to be yourself.
Awesome. And Brett?
Yeah, I would just say to everybody out there, whether you're a leader or an individual contributor, be relevant to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Period.
Awesome. I'm going to do Bruce Lee. Be like water.
Yes, that's a good one.
Right? Be like water. Be flexible. Be open mind.
Yeah.
And within your surroundings, just make sure that you adapt. Adaptability is big. Collaboration is big for me. This wouldn't happen if none of these gentlemen would collaborate, right? But be like water. Wherever your environment is, go
Love
for
it.
it.
There you go.
Love it.
All right. Thank you guys for
Thank
being
you
here
guys very
today.
much.
Thank
Have
you.
a wonderful evening.
All right,
Brett,
see you.
Jason, Constance, you guys are fantastic. Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
conversations. Bye,
Yes.
guys.
Bye.